He's here.
The hour having arrived, we're going to call the Education Finance meeting to order. And we do have a quorum, and we will start with the March 25th minutes. Would anyone care to approve those?
So moved.
Representative Hertas moves the March 25th, 2014 minutes. Any discussion on that? If not, we'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The March 25th, 2014 minutes are approved. Members, we have a bill to be marked up and voted on and sent off to taxes today. That is our goal. So this time I'm going to move House File 3171 to be re-referred to the Taxes Committee. And with that, members, we have the delete all amendment, the 814-0977. I'm going to move the 814-0977, delete all amendment. Any discussion or questions? This is to put the bill in the author's proper form here. Any discussions? If not, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails. The A14-0977 amendment is adopted. Members, there is also the author's amendment, the A4 amendment. And this is identical to what Mr. Strom and Ms. Johnson, when they went through the spreadsheets and went through the bill summary, this is what they're referring to. So I will move that. And members, if you have any questions, would you like Mr. Strom to go over this A4 amendment again? Any members that, I think I'm seeing some nods, so Mr. Strom, would you like to just go over what's in the A4 author's amendment?
Mr. Chair, members, there's a few things in this, bringing the bill into the amendment, delete all amendment into the form the author desired. The first of these is the change to the way the equity funding is calculated. We spoke of this yesterday. Essentially what happens is for school districts now outside of the metro area, for those that are in the 4 counties that are in the greater statistical area, those districts whose home office there would receive the 25% bump as well in equity revenue, but they'll remain in the greater Minnesota region. That's primarily the change on lines 9, or on the amendment lines 1, 3 to 16. Lines 1.7 to 1.9 are just clarification of an effective date. Line 110 of the amendment is the funding for the concurrent enrollment program, putting that in at the level we spoke of yesterday. Lines 11 and 12 of the amendment are for the the career and technical study that was discussed from Representative Isaacson yesterday, and Representative Seltzer's study at $25,000, putting in the dollar amounts there. The next change is technical on lines 113 and 114 to clarify for the disaster schools how we arrive at the average tax base per pupil, lining up the years to be consistent with elsewhere. Then the next set of changes from lines 115 through 120 clarify the Harambe language and match it to the language that's currently in the bonding committee with that, so that the language is identical. Finally, Mr. Chair, on lines 121 to 124 is providing ongoing funding for the Neighborhood Achievement Zone and St. Paul Promise Zone, and lines 125 through through the end of the document on the next page, straighten out the department budget, funding the items that are in that budget, including the additional money for the Board of Teaching on line 127 and the additional money for the Board of Administrators on line 2.1. And that, Mr. Chair, is a quick summary of the A4.
Very good. Any further discussion on the A4? Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you give the reason for putting the promised neighborhoods as a base for appropriation so it's ongoing, please?
Yeah. So, thank you, Representative Erickson. We just thought, after hearing testimony and hearing what they do, and one thing about the program is, and as you heard, it kind of brings all of the stakeholders together all in one. We think that's a very good model, and we want them to be able to know that there's going to be some funding into the future there. It's not just going to be this up and down, so we want to put that into the base.
So, Mr.
Representative
Chair, Mr. Chair,
Eric.
members, I think this is certainly, these are good programs. There's no question. I'm especially impressed with the Minneapolis Promise Neighborhood. But they have an $8 million budget in Minneapolis, and I figured out that's $6,000 a student, and they've been doing that without state funding. St. Paul probably could use a little boost temporarily, but I think we have to keep in mind that once the government starts funding, then these nonprofits are going to decrease their commitment, and that's what's been the success of these two Promise Neighborhood programs, is that the community has coalesced around the mission and provided that. So, though I'll be voting for the amendment, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to express my concern about these two appropriations becoming part of the base.
Very good. Representative Mariani, did you, Representative Moran?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also think, I think Chair Marquart really said it really nicely, but also what we do know is that when communities are under-resourced, and we do have a commitment from community organizations to be fully involved and not to, because of the state funding, to do any less involvement or be any less engaged in providing funding. But what we also know is that when communities are in high need and under-resourced, that research tells us that we need, in order to look at data and really improve outcomes, it has to be a consistent investment. And the minimum investment to really collect data is about a 3-year commitment. So my hope is that as we look at working towards closing the achievement gap, it's not a one-time commitment, but a consistent commitment to helping and ensure that a community that is invested at the local level, that we're all in to really support children and families and communities and our state, that it is an investment that is data-driven, that is research-based, and that will create better outcomes.
Very good. Any further discussion on the A4 amendment? Otherwise, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion prevails. The A4 amendment is adopted. So, here we go. Members, start your amendments. We have the A1-1 amendment. Representative Seltzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This really is just a technical amendment, adding some organizations that wanted to be included that were inadvertently left out, and giving the full description to the new teacher evaluation program, and just making sure that the commissioner has the authority to appoint the commission members to this particular group that will enhance the results.
Representative Seltzer, would you move the A1-1? I don't know if you did there.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I'm sorry. I would like to move the A1-1 amendment, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, I will call for the vote on the A1-1 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails. The A1-1 amendment is adopted. We have the A8 amendment.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the A8 amendment.
Representative Reinert moves the A8 amendment. Discussion.
Yes, Mr. Chair and members, this is obviously a very brief amendment that came from a discussion with the Chamber. Amy Wallstein and I looked at the fact that many of our communities already have very active partnerships between their secondary, post-secondary, and local business communities, some in the form of jointly funded positions directly targeted at career and technical education, and we just wanted to be sure those kinds of arrangements weren't overlooked in this inventory.
Is there any further discussion or questions? If not, I'm going to call for the vote on the A8 amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The motion does prevail. The A8 amendment is adopted. We'll stay in order here. We have the A9 amendment. Representative Myra.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I'd like to move the H3171A9 amendment.
Very good. Representative Myra.
Mr. Chair and members, this was a bill, and it was heard in Early Childhood and Youth Development Policy Committee. It was passed out and re-referred to Education Finance and wasn't heard. But it has some really valuable elements in it, which I'd appreciate a chance just to go over very quickly.
And take your time, Representative Meyer.
Thank you.
Please.
Lines 1.6 and line 1.7 places the administration of the early childhood scholarships within the Office of Early Learning. The interagency spanning the Departments of Education, Health, and Human Services. I believe this is a better fit since early childhood education providers are regulated by both MDE and DHS. On lines 1.18 and 1.20, the 5,000 cap on scholarships is repealed, and the director is required to establish average scholarship amounts based on current available market surveys. On lines 1.120 and 1.21, requires average scholarship amounts to be proportionate across regions and counties. Lines 1.23 through 2.2 provides for financial incentives to pursue higher ratings. Section 4 allows the director to determine that a program is eligible to participate based on certain factors. This allows the director to make a case-by-case review to provide adequate providers in underserved areas. Limiting eligibility programs to only 3- and 4-star rated programs limits access in our underserved parts of our state. Mr. Chair and members, the whole area of literacy is very important to me, particularly since coming to the United States at a young age, Spanish my first language, struggling in school from 1st to 5th grade until I had a tremendous teacher who taught me to read in 5th grade, gaining 5 years in that 1 year. I have worked very diligently seeking to find answers to what truly helps to close the achievement gap and to cause learning. I was selected to be a National Conference of State Legislatures Early Childhood Fellow in 2011 and 2012, and have participated in many programs offered by CSG, Harris Program, Project for Babies, Wilder Foundation. And one of the things that has truly impressed me is how critically important it is for parents to be involved. And the whole premise or idea behind the scholarships is to empower parents, not to empower parents to allow them to pick programs, not programs to pick parents. And so, members, I would very much appreciate your adoption of the A9 amendment.
Thank you very much, Representative Meyer. Any questions or discussion? Representative Dabney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Meyer, I guess I've got a couple of questions and concerns, but one of them is the fiscal impact on the department. Because with your language, particularly on 2.26 and going down there, where the director has to now develop a process to determine whether an agency can receive the scholarships because you're allowing programs with no provider rating whatsoever, no quality indicator whatsoever to receive the scholarships. I'm very concerned about that. But the director now has to develop a program for evaluating them separate from the existing parent aware. There's got to be a cost involved to that, staff time, research, such alike. What's the fiscal impact on the department for this amendment?
Representative Myra.
Mr. Chair, Representative Dabney, I am not aware of the fiscal impact. This is really for hardship situations where there is a region or a county that doesn't have a 3- or 4-star rated program. And to rather than leave the parents in that area out in the cold or having to drive a significant distance or not participate, this is there to allow for some context, some flexibility. It's not, the intent is not that we are setting up a brand new program, a parallel program. It is that where there is difficulty where we have underserved populations, that there would be an allowance for the director to make a ruling.
Representative Dabney.
Well, Reverend Myra, I think the challenge is you're removing the requirement that programs have reached a 3- or 4-star quality level. So it's not limited language in terms of just a crisis in an area where there's no opportunity. You're removing the requirement that they achieve that level. Then you're requiring the director of the Office of Early Childhood to develop a new process for evaluating programs. And then you're actually you're actually decreasing access to the scholarships by taking the cap off, which means some areas of the state will get, some children will get a lot more money, but when you've got a limited pool of money, if I give you more, I give Representative Gruenhagen less.
How can I vote for that?
Well, see? I was working that in just for that point, Representative Gruenhagen. So you're really creating both costs to the department and more problems throughout Minnesota with the implementation of this program, I fear, in this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Reiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to hear from the department because there are obviously this implicates them quite directly.
Very good. Mr. Cordy, welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. Darren Cordy with the Minnesota Department of Education. Mr. Chair, members, thank you for the opportunity to come and testify on this amendment. Just a couple of things I'd like to speak to. First of all, regarding changing the administration of the scholarships from the commissioner to the director of the Office of Early Learning. Currently, the scholarships are administered through the Office of Early Learning at the Minnesota Department of Education under the authority of the Commissioner. There's no other area in statute where we call out a specific division of the department and say, that the director of that division has authority. It's vested in the Commissioner, and then the Commissioner delegates that to her staff, which is how the program currently works. So I think that adding this language in here to say that it's the Office of Early Learning doesn't necessarily create a new agency or it would keep the structure the same, but it would really create confusion, I think, within the statutes and among people who are reading the statutes. I would say that removal of the cap without additional funding would be problematic in that it could result in a lack of statewide distribution of the scholarships. We do have a very limited pot of money that we're talking about here, and in order to keep the scholarships statewide, that's kind of why the cap was insisted upon last year. So I think removing the cap without additional money in the system could result in either the scholarships not remaining statewide or the programs that are currently being funded losing their scholarships. As Representative Dabney pointed out, there would be some administrative processes that we would need to develop that would need to be defensible and reliable in order to determine a way that, well, first of all, to do the average scholarship amounts, and then this additional 15 and 20% that's being under the cap change here, and then also, as Representative Dabney was talking about, the process that we would have to put in place to determine how a program would get a waiver from the requirement of being a 3- and 4-star program by 2016 in order to be eligible for scholarships.
Thank you. Representative Woodard, you're next. Did you have a question for Mr. Cordy?
Well, I don't think I think it's good that Mr. Cordy is here,
okay,
Mr.
very good.
Chair.
Well,
so
just stay at the table if you would there, Mr. Cordy.
Yeah, I don't want to kick him off the hot seat yet because I enjoy talking to Mr. Cordy. Listen, this is a really good attempt, I think, by Representative Myra to address the issues that we've heard in this committee, and I know the Education Policy Committee has heard as well. And I would refer to the line that has been referred to at 2.26. I won't mention the name of the representative so he doesn't have to respond. But it does say that after July 1st, the director may determine It doesn't say must determine, it says may determine. This gives more flexibility to the department in order to do that. And I think certainly it doesn't add any additional confusion just to say that it's the Office of Early Learning. It just really targets where we want this decision to be made. So I appreciate that testimony, but I would say that that doesn't add any confusion. And if you're a rural member and are seeing and are hearing about the lack of accessibility of these scholarships in rural Minnesota, this amendment helps address that issue. It doesn't fix it, because you're absolutely right. This committee and in this bill, we are not adding additional scholarship money, like Winkler would like to in Representative Winkler's bill. That is really what we should be doing. That's the direction we should be taking, but we don't have that opportunity today. What we do is have an opportunity today to help address the issues that we have discussed in this committee, and I think this is a great approach to get there without having to add additional money in, which this committee doesn't seem to want to do at this point. So I certainly would recommend a yes vote on this amendment and would ask for a roll call vote, Mr. Chair.
Very good. A roll call has been asked for of Representative Hertaus.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would also ask that you consider supporting this amendment. As noted in the bill, it says that a program must participate in a quality rating system. The issue really is for access for rural Minnesota and those folks that don't have access to already established four-star programs. How do you get there? How do you develop a program? And so it's articulating in the bill and in the amendment that a special hardship or need has to be cited to the director, and that he may make that determination. So I think this provides an opportunity to build that access for those communities that don't have already a four-star rated program. We heard testimony throughout the whole committee process that this is a new innovation to help close the achievement gap. And so we ought to be supporting those programs that are becoming available to areas of our state and to constituents, and allow these programs to develop and become four-star rated. So I see this as the exception, not the norm, and that we ought to be supporting the development of these programs through the flexibility that this amendment offers.
Very good.
Thank you.
Yep. Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I just want to remind all of us this is an unsession, and this is streamlining. And furthermore, I don't think other divisions of MDE are micromanaged to the extent that we want to micromanage this program. So keep in mind, this is an unsession. We're supposed to be streamlining. That's what Representative Myra is doing here. And furthermore, the obligations that may occur under early childhood program eligibility, I think, are part of the routine work that a director would be doing in the Office of Early Learning. So I don't see that as causing a cost at all, because that is something that would be a daily task that I would assume is something that's done within each division of MDE, without our having to say, well, you need more money because of that particular common sense piece. Thank you.
Representative Radenovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, yesterday, Representative Van Elst and I both had the opportunity to speak to, our desire to see more in scholarships, because there would be rural communities coming online here in the next year. And, of course, because of the difficulty that some parents in rural Minnesota had seen in using a $5,000 scholarship to access a $7,500 program. But my concern here is that if we are using available market surveys to determine the cost of child care across the state, that may not work out favorably for those parents in rural Minnesota who have lower child care costs than those in the metropolitan area. And so without additional funds coming in, I don't see any need to tinker with the allocations that are currently available, and I would encourage my colleagues to vote no on this amendment. Thank you.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just would like to point out that early learning scholarships are not child care. This is early learning. This is what this committee said it was committed to doing. This is not about child care for rural Minnesota. This is about educational opportunities for rural Minnesota. So I just want to reinforce that as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I also want to remind members that last year this committee did authorize $40 million into early learning scholarships. That was a seven-fold 7-fold increase from current funding before then. So this has been a major commitment for this committee in this session. And when we heard from Mr. Carter, he was talking about that it sounded like the geographical balance of these scholarships that went out were pretty good. It sounded very balanced between rural and the metro. And one concern I have with reducing or eliminating the cap without increasing funding is you now are going to have less kids served than what we do now, or at least what the current projection is, which could really, I don't know how that's going to impact different areas of the states with a lot of uncertainties. Ms. Hilden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Nancy Hilden, on behalf of Many Minds. And with regrets, we appreciate the intent of what's behind this amendment, but we oppose the amendment for several reasons. Number one, the language on line 1.18 to 1.20 is somewhat similar to what was in the Winkler bill, giving some flexibility to the MDE to actually take a look at the surveys and determine what the right amount is. Really what you have to get to is child-focused needs rather than program-focused needs. And so that's where we have to ultimately get to, and giving the department flexibility is a good thing. Unfortunately, though, I would agree with what Chair Marquart just said, that we are actually in a position of not having sufficient funds to keep scholarships going out even at the current level. That raises another issue that has been discussed here. If you take away the requirement of tying these to quality, what we know already is that there are lines of kids on waiting lists already for these scholarships. There is huge demand already across the state. So if we somehow take away this quality measure for what we're tying these scholarships to, it brings us back to what we already have, which is more like a CCAP model than what we're trying to get to, which is the early learning model, and rewarding those providers that are actually doing these things that we need children to be engaged in, the literacy, numeracy, at a very early age. So we appreciate the intent here and look forward to trying to work with all of you on addressing the cap issue, because really we do have to get to that child-focused rather than program-focused model that the department is doing, but we do not support this amendment.
Thank you very much. Other further testifiers on the A9 amendment? Okay. Who would like to proceed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I would just like to clarify something for the members of the committee. My name is Valerie Dozland, and as you know, I wear many hats. So I just wanted to make sure members were aware that under the parent-aware model, throughout the state, school-based programs and Head Start programs have gone through the parent-aware rating and are rated and are eligible to accept scholarships, whether it's through Pathway 1 or Pathway 2. Now, as you've heard, the appropriation amount doesn't necessarily meet the need, but there are programs throughout the state that are able to accept scholarship children. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, members, my name is Jim Bartholomew with the Minnesota Business Partnership. And we do want to thank you and the committee and the legislature last year for your increased investments in the parent-aware scholarships. But we'd encourage you to support this amendment because it really does deal with two very critical issues that coming out of last session were apparent. One was the $5,000 cap and the need for flexibility on that. And yes, if you create flexibility in the cap without additional funding, we may serve fewer kids, but the kids that we do serve will be better served. We'll be able to fully meet the family's needs. As Representative Radinovich mentioned, there may be families who need $7,500 to take care of their child's needs, but with the hard cap of $5,000, we won't be able to get there for them. So that's one thing. Eliminating the hard cap is very important. And we think Section 4 is also very important in the sense that it allows perhaps especially in greater Minnesota. After 2016, to be eligible, you have to be a 3- or 4-star rated program. And while we certainly support that goal, there may be, as we roll out the scholarships in greater Minnesota, just the fact that we can keep program providers in the parent-aware system where they're participating and they're a 1- and a 2-star provider, that's still better than not being in the system at all. So we're still recognizing quality and just creating a little bit of flexibility, especially in greater Minnesota, for providers to continue to participate. So we see this with the two benefits. One is to continue to expand access in greater Minnesota in particular, and then also as a way to more fully meet family needs. And we're also supporting that particular, the cap provision in Representative Winkler's bill. We just think it's more important to fully meet the needs of students. And we understand the limited pool, but if we can fully meet kids' needs, that's the best thing. So thank you.
Yep, thank you very much. Any Representative Quam?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if members can recall, yesterday towards the end of testimony, we had a member from the public come and mention how their children had additional needs. And the flexibility allowed in this amendment, I think, could help special cases of where there may be a program that is working on bringing together additional support for children that have special needs, that is maybe new and very progressive in the approach and doesn't quite fit into the definition, or maybe is in the process of the STAR program, and the commissioner could see something that this could be very good for the children. It's a new program, and that we would, assist that family and the children to partake in that. And that I think that I'm getting a indication there's seems to be support for additional, and maybe the chair could make a slight technical amendment to correct some numbers in a couple of locations and bring about the possibility of helping, more fully the children of this state. Just some thoughts, Mr. Chair and members.
Appreciate that. Representative Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I don't know if Mr. Bartholomew needs to come back down and clarify his statements, but what I heard is it's the official position of the Minnesota Business Partnership that it's okay for there to be a lower standard for these early learning scholarships in certain parts of the state. And there seems to be no timeline by which these programs need to get up to speed with programs in other parts of the state. And I find this surprising, and especially in light of earlier testimony that throughout the state there are school-based programs that would be eligible as 3- or 4-star programs for these early learning scholarships. So maybe he would like to clarify. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bartholomew.
Mr. Chair, Representative Morgan, thank you. Was looking at particular line 2.24 where it says before July 1, 2016, current law says they can only participate if they're 3- or 4-star rated programs. As we read the language, it's creating the flexibility that if they're 1- and 2-star rated programs, they would also continue to be eligible. And from our perspective, we'd love everybody to be a 4-star rated program. But the key is really, we're still in the beginning stages of the parent-aware system. The key is to get people into the system and build their quality. So rather than telling people that if you're not a 3- or 4 rated program by July 1 of 2016, you're not going to be eligible for any funds in or a 2-star rated program. We'd like to keep them in the program at a 2-star rather than providing an incentive for them to drop out altogether. So we're very much in support of providing resources so families can access quality. And we'd love everybody to be a 4. But if there's somebody that's a 2, we'd like to keep them in the system rather than kicking them out.
Representative Morgan, Anything further?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Representative Wills.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just following up on the discussion here, and what Mr. Bartholomew was pointing out and what the amendment language says, I want to remind members that this amendment would actually incentivize and encourage programs to stay in the Parent Aware program. If you'll look on 2.25, well, 2.24 and 2.25, it says that before July 1st, 2016, satisfy the director of its ongoing commitment to participate in the quality rating and improvement system. So it encourages the programs to stay involved. And then on page 1, lines 2.23 through 2.1, there's new language in the amendment that clarifies that a director may increase by up to 15% the scholarship amount for children enrolled in a 3-star parent-aware rated program, and may increase by up to 20% the scholarship amount for children enrolled in a 4-star parent-rated program. And reading that language, it does provide that incentive to look for that and achieve that 3- and 4-star parent-aware rated program. So I think that the amendment accomplishes what we're looking for.
Very good. Representative Moran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as I sit here and listen to this amendment come before this committee, I can undoubtedly say that the chair of this committee and the majority in the House is truly committed to investing in early childhood education and the huge investment that we made over $40 million to create a program where we can create access for children to have the opportunity to have access to an early childhood environment, which is really important. And no one has made that commitment any better than the chair in this majority. But what I also heard Representative Meyer say is that in the rural community, that kids, that the scholarships are not readily available. It's not enough. And this is the reason why you bring this amendment forward. But I've also heard testimony that raising the cap will create less opportunity for the rural community. And so the intent may be to raise the cap so that a family could be more fully able to access the early learning scholarship, but it also gives less children the opportunity to have access to early learning. So I'm a little confused here with what you want to do and why you want to do it, if the need in the rural community is to access early learning and to make opportunity more available, when this amendment does not do that.
Representative Myra, did you want to answer that? You're not on the list.
Certainly.
She did.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Representative Moran. During the discussion, I was given information by staff on the impact of repealing. It doesn't increase the cap, it repeals the cap that's listed on line 1.18 in the amendment. And if you keep the number of children that are served the same and you repeal that cap, the estimated cost is additional $4 million. Yes, that is a lot of money, but in the education finance budget, this is obviously, and has been said a number of times, is a great priority that we would better serve those families. And so I would encourage people to consider and vote for this amendment. And I'd also like to point out, Mr. Chair and members, on line 2.28 is that the work that the director is being asked to do here is to provide programs can be eligible to participate if. And on line 2.28, it says the program provider cites a hardship or special circumstance. So this isn't supposed to be run-of-the-mill, everybody doing it. It is supposed to provide flexibility for the Office of Early Learning and the director to allow programs to continue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have a question for Representative Myra. On your lines 1.23, going down through 1.25, you talk about either a 15% increase or a 20% increase. What is the base? You've removed the cap, so it's 15% or 20% of what?
Representative Myra.
Mr. Chair, that percentage works off of the amount that is determined by the director. Let's see. On line 1.18 and on, it says the director annually must establish average scholarship amounts based on current available market surveys of child care providers, prices, or other useful information. So the percentage would be working off of that, those determined amounts.
Representative Newton. Mr. Chair, is that then, that's by region? So with a fixed cap, if you're increasing the amount by 15 or 20%, you're actually going to be serving a lot less children. Is that correct, Representative Myra?
Representative Myra.
Mr. Chair, yes, you would be serving fewer children, but this program is just starting up. The intent is to incentivize providers to improve the quality of their service, and it also is the purpose of this amendment is to empower parents and families to make choices rather than having their choices limited.
Representative Radenovich.
Thank you. And, Mr. Chair, as we kind of center around this idea of serving less children, I guess the question is then are we voting on an amendment where certain children have had access to these scholarships in this year, and then that those same children would not presumably have access the next year if this amendment is enacted? Could the author clarify?
Yeah, I don't know if someone wants to answer that. I don't see anyone coming forward. Well, Mr. Cordy, what implications would that be, I guess, for the second year here of the biennium?
Mr. Chair, Darren Cordy with the Department of Education. I think that it would depend on what the average scholarship amounts would be based on. I mean, if we're assuming that the average scholarship amount is higher than the current cap of $5,000, then presumably there would be fewer scholarships available, and therefore there would be some students that would not be served that are currently being served. But, I mean, there probably need to be some more analysis on what the numbers look like to be definitive on that.
Representative Radenovich, another question.
Yeah, I mean, in light of the uncertainty, I certainly would hope that no student who had a scholarship this year would then the next year when they go to take advantage of one of these programs not have access to scholarship. And so, I guess I remain unchanged in my opposition to this amendment.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually had a question for Mr. Cordy since he walked away. And I'll ask it as you walk back down. But so what's the percentage of the $40 million that is left from their initial allocation?
Mr. Cordy.
Mr. Chair and Representative Woodard, I believe all the money has been allocated but not necessarily distributed to the schools yet. It would be a better question for the regional scholarship administrators, which I'm not sure that they're here. But that's certainly something that, maybe Ms. Hilton could speak to it, but that's certainly information we could have for you when Representative Winkler's bill is heard on Thursday.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Cordy. Appreciate that.
Ms. Hilton.
Mr. Chair and Representative Woodard, yes, and I think you will have opportunity to hear a little bit more, but just a high-level answer to that on the pathway to award letters were sent out to all schools in September saying what the amount was that they would receive. There was time taken at MDE between then and the end of the year to come up with the form that the schools would submit or other providers would submit, a claim form. So once you're serving a child, you submit the claim form for X number of months and then get that back. That is in place now. But that did not mean that there were, so the dollars were encumbered, or the obligation, or the commitment to the school was made so that they could begin effective October 1, serving kids, and they would be reimbursed for all children served starting October 1. Now, there's been varying response to that by different schools. But effective October 1, all the money was allocated that could be and was available to be used to serve children.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Representative Erickson.
I have a question for Nancy. Come back.
Ms. Hilden?
Ms. Hilden. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the comment you just made, Ms. Hilden, are you suggesting that more dollars have flowed to school programs than to independent providers?
Mr. Chair, no. There's two pathways the department chose to distribute equally between Pathway 1, which is the model designed to help encourage providers to improve their quality in order to participate, and Pathway 2, where we know we have quality providers like schools and Head Starts and certain care providers, to increase the services that they provide, to increase the number of slots so there are more children that can benefit from that model. They divided the money equally, Pathway 1 and Pathway 2. They divided the money equally rural metro. And I would say that the bulk, I think it's safe to say that the bulk, but we'll get into that more on Thursday. The bulk of the Pathway 2 did go to school programs, but it did also go to Head Starts in both Metro and Greater Minnesota, and it did go to center-based. I'm not sure how many went to licensed family providers that are quality rated to expand a number of slots, but you're going to hear from some rural providers on Thursday about what they did with those scholarships, Pathway 2.
Very good. Representative Erickson.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And the reason I raised that issue is in my discussions with providers from rural Minnesota, they're really concerned that they're being squeezed out.
Any further debate or testimony? Representative Seltzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would, first of all, just like to thank Representative Myra for bringing forward this amendment, and the intent behind it, I think, is very sincere and very good. I do agree. Obviously, the chair and this committee and our legislature made a huge investment and increase in our commitment to quality early childhood education last session, and I, of course, and across the state, we're very happy about that. And unfortunately, we have not met the need, so I hope we continue that conversation next session. But I do, so at this point in time, it's difficult for me to support this amendment, though I wish that I could, but I don't think we have the amount of resource. But I do have a question. It might be for MDE, and I'm wondering, there are obviously in Greater Minnesota some educational opportunities for children that have not reached the 3- or 4-star rating, and I'm wondering what we're doing now to help those organizations or groups reach that higher rating.
Well, Representative Seltzer, would that be okay, and members, if we talk about that on Thursday? I think
Yes,
that's more
that
of
would
a
be better.
Thursday question
Yes.
than,
Thank you.
would that be all right, Representative?
Absolutely. Thank
Okay.
you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Seeing no further debate, a roll call has been called on the A9 amendment. The clerk will take the roll.
Chair Marquart.
No.
Vice Chair Slocum.
No.
Representative Woodard.
Yes.
Representative Anzels. Representative Bernardi.
No.
Representative Breinert.
No.
Representative Dabney.
No.
Representative Erickson.
Yes.
Representative Gruenhagen.
Yes.
Representative Hertas.
Yes.
Representative Mariani.
No.
Representative McDonald.
Yes.
Representative Moran.
No.
Representative Morgan.
No.
Representative Myra.
Yes.
Representative Newton. Representative Quam.
Yes.
Representative Radinovich.
No.
Representative Seltzer.
No.
Representative Wells.
On the A9 amendment, there being 8 ayes and 10 nays, the motion does not prevail. The A9 amendment is not adopted. We have the A10 amendment. Representative Mariani.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I'm not going to move this amendment. My understanding is that this bill is supposed to be free of pure policy issues, and so with that directive from leadership in the House, I don't think this is appropriate. We did think it was appropriate when we drafted it. We've had conversations with the department in the meantime, and they've assured us that if we were to move forward with this in another bill, that we could do so without incurring any cost to the department. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'm not going to offer the A10 amendment.
Thank you, Representative Mariani. We have the A15 amendment. Representative Seltzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the A15 amendment.
All right. Representative?
This is just some minor cleanup after hearing some of the input from the committee when this bill was presented. We have added access to mass transit as one of the factors to be considered in developing school facilities. And in respect to those of us who use wheelchairs, we substituted pedestrians for walkers.
Very good. Looks like some technical changes here. So any further debate on the A15 amendment? If not, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. The motion prevails. The A15 amendment is adopted. The A16 amendment. Representative Slocum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. What this is technical also. What this amendment does on page 16, after line 7, it inserts, it readjusts the charter school payment schedule to treat charters like districts when we're at the 90-10 payment schedule. It doesn't take effect until 2015.
Okay.
And I should also say that, Mr. Chair and members, that the MDE and MAX, the Minnesota Association of Charter Schools, is on board with this.
Members, on line 2.23, it says the section is effective the day following final enactment. I'd like to make an oral amendment. That should be July 1st of 2015. Section is effective July 1st, 2015. Would you like to incorporate that, Representative Slocum?
I certainly would.
Okay. Any thoughts, discussion on this? If not, I'm going to call for the vote on the A16 amendment. All those in favor say aye.
As amended.
Very good. Thank you, Representative Erickson. A16 amendment as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay.
Nay.
The A16 amendment, the motion does prevail. The A16 amendment is adopted. The A18 amendment. I have the A18 amendment. Okay, yeah, very good. Oh, yes. Okay, hold on. Let's the A17 amendment. I'm out of order here. Representative Breinert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to offer the A17 amendment. In 2010, a requirement that all school districts include a physical education minimum standards component in their curriculum passed into law. Members of the Minnesotans for Healthy Kids Coalition advocated for this change in response to the overwhelming evidence of the benefits of a comprehensive physical education curriculum. Excuse me. Higher test scores, fewer disciplinary issues, healthier kids. This law has been in place for nearly 4 years now. The purpose of this amendment is to request a report from the Department of Education on the status of physical education in Minnesota schools today. The amendment embodies Representative Norton's House File 2672 that was heard in the House Education Policy Committee and passed with bipartisan support. The bill does come with a $73,000 fiscal note, and because there are still some issues to work out with respect to funding, I am planning to withdraw the amendment. However, I would like to make a few comments about the merits of the proposal. This proposal asks MDE to provide the legislature with a summary detailing how much time our kids spend in physical education, how are schools measuring and assessing fitness levels, how much of that time is being taught by a certified instructor, how much physical activity are kids getting through the course of the day. Representative Norton and a very long list of advocates have been working with MDE throughout the process and remain more than willing to work with the department on ensuring a successful proposal. We have heard compelling testimony on this issue a number of times over the last years. There is persuasive evidence connecting superior academic performance with quality physical education. With that, Mr. Chair, I withdraw the amendment, asking that we keep this issue in mind as the bill proceeds.
Representative Erickson.
Thank you.
Representative Breinert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Breinert, I understand why you withdrew this. I visited with the same folks yesterday. But, Mr. Chair, I'd like to have Mr. Cordy come down to the table because there are items in this report that I believe were asked for as far back as 2010, and I'm wondering why the Common Course Catalog can't fulfill some of these items. Mr. Cordy.
Mr. Cordy.
Mr. Chair and Representative Erickson, I would say that it may, the Common Course Catalog, as you asked about the other day, it is up and running. You can find it on the MDE website.
I looked at it.
It may cover some of these things, but really this is beyond just what is being offered as physical education courses. If that's all that was being asked of this, it would be as simple as utilizing kind of the listservs that our folks have with physical education contacts within the school. But this is really asking more beyond the scope of physical education into physical activity and where kids are receiving physical activity outside of the FIAD classroom, including recess, including extracurricular activities, before and after school activities. So to some extent, you're right. I think we may be able to pull some of that as far as course offerings through the Common Course Catalog. Maybe the nuts and bolts of what those courses entail might need a little bit of a deeper dive to get what is being trying to be accomplished by this amendment and the bill that Representative Norton's carrying.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Cordy, maybe next year we can look forward to some kind of report, at least a mini report from you as to what the Common Course Catalog can tell us about this course and perhaps other courses that are taught in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Dabney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative Breinert, I certainly appreciate the attention here. There's good research on kids can learn better when they've had a chance to get their wiggles out first, or at some point. And I've got an 11-year-old who can even spontaneously provide that testimonial. Kind of amazed all of us when he did. I guess I would urge you, however, as this goes forward, to think of this in a larger context. There's, I think, a larger question about what we have done to the school day and how we are failing to provide a holistic education for kids. Under No Child Left Behind, with a relentless focus on only math and reading and high-stakes testing, we've narrowed the curriculum in a number of areas, FIAD being one of them, but not exclusively. And while a narrow look at just FIAD and physical activities has some value, I think if we only look at this larger question, first we look at it in FIAD, and then the art folks come forward, and then the social studies folks come forward, and then other people come forward with their narrow lens, we lose the larger picture, and that's what we've already done. So I would just encourage you to nestle this within a larger question of, are we adequately meeting the needs of the whole child, and how can we use some of these non-academic times narrowly defined to actually enhance academic learning and development of the whole child. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Reiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, Representative Dabney, I agree with your broader point. However, I don't think we should lose sight of what we do know about physical activity and brain development. And it's so direct and so clear, and it would be good for legislators to remember that, too, in terms of our engaging our brains. If we got up and did a little, maybe we need a little stretch in between committees or something. I don't know. But so,
I like that. Well, I like that, Representative Dabney. Yes.
So the baseball reference has been accomplished. Yes. All right. So I do agree with you, but I don't want to lose sight of what we know here directly, and I think we can do both. So I think your point is well taken.
Very good. Thank you. Does anyone care to move the A14 amendment?
Mr. Chair, thank you. That's my amendment. However, I am going to put that amendment on the omnibus policy bill, I believe, with the consent of Chair Mariani.
All right, so that might be a discussion for tomorrow. Very good. Thank you, Representative Newton. We have the A18 amendment. Representative Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment is...
Would you like to move that?
I'm sorry, I'll move the A18 amendment. Thank you.
All right, very good.
The A18 amendment, we heard it the other night. Representative Sawatsky brought forward the special education paperwork reduction bill. I guess my concern and the concern of others is about the ongoing costs in the tails, Mr. Chair, and maybe we can get some testimony to that effect, and that'll help us decide whether or not we're going to do it. It is, after all, your bill, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cordy, if you could come forward and talk to the tails, the ongoing costs for the A18 amendment.
Mr. Chair, just pulling the amendment up here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this. Darren Cordy from the Minnesota Department of Education. We worked closely with Representative Sawatsky after the hearing the other day to try and figure out a way that we could remove the ongoing costs of this and try and limit the scope of this bill to the current appropriation, which was given last year to kind of address this issue. So we feel that the language here, we've removed a lot of the ongoing costs as far as technical support and expertise that would be provided by the department, as well as some of the more complicated ongoing measures that were in the initial bill, which would have included the ability to do third-party Medicare and Medicaid billing through this system, as well as having it be a completely integrated school interoperability framework with kind of horizontal integration across districts and vertical integration with the department. I think that the advocates for this bill have agreed that to do that would carry some significant ongoing costs and be maybe better addressed next session during a budget session. So for purposes of the $1.76 million appropriation that was last year, we feel that what is captured in the A18 amendment is something that we can accomplish at MDE through a request for proposal process to accomplish these things.
Oh, thank you. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was wondering if, given we actually use dynamic scoring on things, the intent of this is to save time, effort. I assume that there would be some amount of savings that could be calculated, even though it's not allowed, and then, we don't do dynamic scoring. Has the department looked at how much this actually saves, and would that not offset effects of tails?
Mr. Cordy.
Mr. Chair and members, Representative Quam, we did, in response to Representative Woodard's question the other day about whether schools can, how schools pay for these systems now. Currently, it's done out of federal funds, so there would be some savings to the federal funds. I'm not sure if they'd be able to divert the use of those federal funds. I might look to our school finance director, who's also here, but there would be some savings to the districts, but my understanding is that it wouldn't be in state funds, it would be in federal funds.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And having been involved with Zumber Education District, which is a cooperative effort between several small school districts with special ed, anytime you can not spend part of the federal on overhead and actually devote those dollars to be spent on the children, that has a total savings. And frankly, with the underfunding of the mandate, I don't think there's any concern, shall we say, of any district not utilizing all possible federal funds that are available. And therefore, I think that it'd be nice if the committee could hear how much would be available, because what we did is we took the federal dollars, which are more constrained, and fit and utilize them. Then we used the state dollars, which gave us more flexibility to cover the costs for children that didn't quite fit in to those buckets. And of course, we had to make up because both the state and federal dollars don't cover the mandates and the needs of the students. So I think really this type of effort, we need to look at the cost-benefit analysis, and I think if it showed the true assistance, there wouldn't really be much for tails. I think there would be change that would be back in the pockets of the districts to spend as they sorely need.
Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cordy, is this assuming there will be one system? And if that's answer is yes, how about the cost to the districts then to get, to change over from what they might like now? And I think there are licensing fees, so I see a local impact here.
Mr. Cordy.
Mr. Chair and Representative Erickson, I believe the bill requires that school districts would have to use this system by 2018-19. We've had conversations with the author. I think that's more of a policy decision for the committee. We see, I think the way that we see it now, that the way that it would work in 15-16 through 17-18 would be that districts would have an option to continue to use their current program or use the state program. So it would be required until 18-19. So in terms of what a local impact would be, I don't think that would be realized until 18-19. I think the department's kind of neutral on whether or not that's a good idea to have it be required by all districts to use or not, or to let the districts choose whether or not to use their existing vendors or the state system.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Cordy, I'm not sure this is, you're going to be able to answer this. It might be a question for Dr. Melcher, but the federal funds that you identified that's helping pay for this in the local school districts, are we able to tap into those federal funds to help pay for what we're trying to do to create a statewide system, either by charging that back to the schools or by somehow funneling that directly into the state for this project?
Dr. Melcher.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Woodard, Tom Melcher with the Department of Education. The school districts in the state receive a fixed amount of federal funds for special education programs, and the cost of software that they use for reporting is one of the things that they can use those dollars for. So if there was a change that reduced the cost to the school districts of the software reporting, they'd still have the same amount of federal dollars, and they would just free them up and use them for other purposes that would lower their cross-subsidy, but couldn't be used for state purposes.
Okay.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Dr. Melcher. I think that does clear it up. So this isn't a specific appropriation that they have to spend it on software specifically. It's an overall special ed that they then use it for. Okay, thank you. That really helps. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any testimony on this amendment? Seeing none, I'm going to call for the vote. Anything else, Representative Morgan?
My questions were answered. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Okay, I'm going to call for the vote on the Representative Woodard.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry. I thought, I guess I got this indication that we weren't actually going to vote on this. what does this do to the budget target and to the tails target? You mentioned that we have a tails target.
Correct.
What is that going to do to our tails target with the additional $6.5 million?
Okay, I think through the testimony of Mr. Cordy, this $1.7 million there for this year, that was money that was allocated, authorized to the department last year. So they're going to use that funding, so there's no new funding. And then Mr. Cordy just said, with the language here of this amendment, that what would have entailed tail costs in the future are no longer there. And I think his testimony is there would be no tails.
Okay, so, Mr. Chair,
Representative Woodard.
There was a fiscal note on the Sawatsky bill originally, right, that had that on there. So, so we're just saying that the department is saying that the fiscal note is not accurate and that we're not going to actually incorporate that? What is the difference?
We'll have Mr. Cordy mention that, but I believe there were some things taken out of the original bill that generated that fiscal note. Mr. Cordy.
Mr. Chair, members, and Representative Woodard, that's correct. The original bill had the requirement to basically institute what's called school interoperability framework, which would be an expensive way basically to have all district systems communicate with each other. That was taken out of this bill. There was a requirement to have the system do third-party Medicaid and Medicare billing. That was also taken out of this bill. And then there was a requirement for ongoing technical support and professional expertise to districts, and that was also removed from the original Sawatsky bill language.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, so we'll ask for the vote on the A18 amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. The A18 amendment, the motion prevails. The A18 amendment is adopted. Any other amendments to come before the committee? If not, members, I would like you, before we discuss any further and vote, if you would take this spreadsheet out, and I'm going to have Mr. Strom briefly go over this. This is a finance committee, so those are the numbers.
Committee members, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. There's a preliminary printout for House File 3171 in the folders, oriented landscape on the page showing the three primary areas where this bill changes revenue for fiscal year 15. I'm still having a little modeling difficulty with the changes that we had last year, so these numbers may change a little bit between now and Ways and Means as I get a better handle on that. But three categories, very briefly. The general education formula allowance goes up $58 per pupil. Statewide, this has a aid entitlement revenue, impact of $60.3 million. You can see up and down the column how that is distributed amongst the school districts. The English learner revenue change is a $6 million revenue change, and again there you can see how that's distributed. And then finally the school readiness change is about a $2 million or $1.99 million change, and that's distributed there. So in the last column of total amounts per district, $68.4 million in the revenue amount distributed for fiscal year 15, and then the last four columns show those on a per pupil basis using the unweighted pupil count that's listed in the first column, so you can see in which of those three categories each of the districts is getting revenue under the provisions of this bill. And go ahead.
All right, and then I would also like Mr. Strom to look at the impact of Representative Zerwas, Representative Fitzsimmons, kind of a mixed bill, and there's a number of school districts that will gain, and my understanding is, are there anyone that loses in this situation there, Mr. Strom?
Mr. Chair, members, a second change that and I think I've got the wrong fiscal year on the printout here. I think fiscal 17 is the first year of the equity change. So on the headline, change that to 17, please. Using fiscal year 15 data, things will change a teeny bit, but just to get a printout in front of you this morning, there are 17 districts in the 4 counties that would touch or would be in the metropolitan statistical area Those are Sherburne, Wright, Isanti, and Chisago. Those 17 districts with their administrative office in one of those 4 counties would qualify for additional equity aid equal to 25% of the amount of the base equity, which depends on the percentiles in each district. And you can see there in the far right column that we're estimating a revenue amount of about $1.3 million, provided the equity numbers don't change. The way that provision is, or the equity percentiles don't change between now and the 17 data. The way that the language is written, these districts remain in the rural or greater Minnesota equity area, but get the 25% bump. So there's no effect to the percentiles. There's no moving of a district from one region to another. So in answer to your question, this provision should not cause a loss of equity revenue to any other school district absent a behavioral change. So, Mr. Chair, far right column there shows the $1.3 million impact on a revenue basis in fiscal year 17 using lousy data for fiscal year 15. And I hope to have that improved soon.
There you go. All right. So members there, the numbers may change, but you see the districts that will gain some additional revenue in that portion of the bill. So, members, debate, discussion? Representative Mariani. No, we will, any debate before we take a final vote. So, no, Representative Mariani.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, let me say, a very good bill. Some of us have been here for a while. We've seen what we haven't done for schools relative to resources and revenues. You had a good hearing last year on the cumulative effect over the last 12, 15 years. And prior to last year's action, we were looking at, when in real dollars in terms of inflationary, impacts on our schools, severely underfunding our schools. I think I could safely say, $1.5 billion, maybe upwards of $2 billion. We took a big whack at that last year. And even though inflation is low right now, inflation doesn't stop. And as I said, the cumulative effects, so we know districts are still, some are still struggling. Even in the face of all the good work that we did last year, we had districts that were looking at layoffs. And so we looked for all sorts of ways to be able to help with that. So I think this helps. It's a small way to help, but at least it signals that we have every intention to fulfill our commitment to make sure that our schools are properly resourced. And on top of that, you got some really good stuff here in terms of efficiencies, episode seltzers, even small things like the review and comment work. Those are important in terms of fiscal impacts. And then we set up some future efficiencies as well. The online directive in terms of special ed, I think will also pay off over the long haul. So you've got a great bill, and I think we should all support it, and I wish you well with it for sure. I do have some concerns, but my concerns are not with you or with the bill. My concerns has to do with the nature of this session and how we've decided to separate out policy from finance in all of our divisions. And quite frankly, I think that I'm confident, but I am concerned that might put at risk our ability to keep driving reform of our K-12 delivery system. If we're going to close gaps, we've got to make sure we not only put more funds and resources and help our schools be more efficient, we also have to make sure that they are acting confidently and assertively on best practices that are emerging from around the field that get at the very difficult issue regarding gaps. So in this bill, we do a much-needed movement toward ELL funding by lifting the cap from 5 to 6 years. That's a very real, as you can see in the spreadsheets before you, that's going to produce some very needed revenues for our schools. But, Mr. Chair, members, it was always my intent that, and I don't think anyone disagrees with this around here, it's always been my intent that as we step up to meet our obligations to properly resource our schools, we use that as an opportunity also to drive reform. We have big reform corresponding provisions in the omnibus policy bill connected to the ELL funding. In my mind, the worst thing that would happen would be at the end of the day that we wind up doing, it's a good thing, we put more funds via the ELL category for our schools, but we lose out on the opportunity to leverage good reform that is just solidly informed by best practices out there on the field. And so we're going to have that bill up, tomorrow. I suspect we're going to embrace that bill and push it forward. My concern has less to do with this committee, with your leadership. It has more to do with just the dynamics of this session. And I would hope that at the end we're not separating out good policy reform from needed revenue. It's all about creating opportunities for students. It's all about closing gaps. We need to constantly remind everyone here that we need to do both policy and proper financing. So with that, Mr. Chair, I proudly support your bill. I think it's one heck of a good bill, and look forward to seeing it move forward successfully.
Thank you very much, Chair Mariani. Representative Radenovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think that throughout the debates we've had on the bills that make up this omnibus bill, I've had an opportunity to speak to a lot of the different things. But I just wanted to make one mention of my disappointment on Friday when we were passing the tax bill, which had the LOR provision in it, and Representative Zerwas had gotten up and said that the bill actually had an adverse impact on his school district's revenue situation. As it turns out, it was 50 cents per student, which isn't a significant amount of money, but it sort of tempered my enthusiasm about it, and I didn't understand exactly what had produced that loss of revenue. Well, I talked to Mr. Strom here earlier in the week, and it's had something to do with the equity, the change in equity and the ratio and whatnot. And so I'm particularly happy that we're actually including the provision here that will allow those schools that touch the metropolitan statistical area to have additional equity revenue. I do remember when Representative Zerwas came before this committee last year and testified to some of the unique challenges that Elk River faces as a growing community with a diverse population, and I think it's a good thing that this committee did to recognize the other schools that are in that area, and so I'm happy to see that in our bill. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Representative Reinert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, there are a lot of things I like about this bill, and I'm just going to highlight a couple of what I'd consider dangling conversations from last session. I think it's really significant that we addressed crosswinds and Harambee and didn't lose what are magnificent programs for students and really have programs that have moved the dial on student achievement. So if we're talking about achievement gaps, that's a very significant decision that we made there. And that we finally invested in the, if I can find my own notes here, the Safe Schools Levy. That was on our minds last session, and I think we felt that that was something we ought not to have missed, so that we did that. Those are important things. And then concurrent enrollment, it's a nod to the concurrent enrollment need. There's more need there, but at least we have called attention to the fact that that is a part of our long-term vision. If we're talking about career and college readiness, we have to look at the costs that we're incurring in our transition and partnership with between secondary and post-secondary. But I would be remiss if I didn't speak to something that's missing in this bill, and that's funding for teacher development and evaluation. While there is funding on the formula, and certainly one could argue that for non-QComp districts, they can take that formula funding and direct it toward their teacher development and evaluation program. We do have some school districts who are just beginning this journey. The rollout is next year, and we haven't targeted directly any funding at that. We funded the pilot project at $10 million, but there's no sustainability there. So I think as a legislature, we need to pay attention here and watch the rollout, watch the costs, really do some documentation on those costs from the range of districts, from those just beginning to those who are really have been doing a full and complete job, even aside from QComp, and then the QComp districts, because we have a serious equity issue on funding teacher evaluation and development. So I hope we'll carry forward that concern. With that, I definitely support your bill, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And in order to save time, I won't mention the member's name. It's no slight to the member. So the unnamed member brought up the location effect, and I just want to repeat that proximity to the metro doesn't always define if a school district has a need with diversity, with English as a second language, and I hope at some point we can go the next step and address the need as opposed to who your neighbors are.
Very good. And Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will echo some of the comments that we said yesterday that this is a great committee. You do a great job of being the chair, and we all appreciate the input and respect that we all enjoy as being a member of this committee, because we're all in it for the same reason. We may have different ways to get there, but we certainly all agree with that, and so I appreciate the culture that you've created for this committee, and that's not true in all committees. So I know it's not just an easy thing to get done. But I also wanted to echo a little bit of what Chair Mariani said, is that we had an opportunity here to look at some real reform and to back it with finances. And there's some good things in this bill. I certainly think putting money on the formula makes sense. I would like to have seen more on the formula as opposed to some of the other programs we've invested in. But I think in addition, the Reading Corps program that we're helping to fund is outstanding. If you haven't seen a Reading Corps volunteer in action, I would certainly recommend you do it, because it is an amazing program and does a lot of what we like to do when it comes to literacy. But some of the big major issues that we're missing, and that is the mandates that our school districts are constantly talking about, that we like to talk about. There's not much mandate relief in here. The flexibility in staffing. We can all agree that one of the major components of success for a kid's education is the person standing in front of them in the classroom. And our ability to, as Representative Breinart mentioned, is the teacher development. It's the pieces of flexibility and staffing for our school systems. Those things and those reforms are really missing in what we've done last year and this year as well. And again, I think our early learning scholarships are a great opportunity. And even though that we've had some of the advocates testify that blowing the caps off doesn't help and would actually be a hindrance, I disagree. And I think that is a reflection of the fact that, unfortunately, in this committee, one of the bad things that happens, and it's not a reflection on the chair, it's not a reflection on the members of this committee, but what we hear from our education establishment. We don't hear a lot from parents. We heard a parent yesterday talk about the effect of funding on their kids. And you looked around this room, everybody listened to that. Mm-hmm. That's what we need to hear more of, is from parents, from kids themselves, from the students, and it is not a denigration of the good work that lobbyists do on behalf of the education establishment, but we hear from them all the time. And I would hope that, and I'm not sure how we do that, but certainly the more we can hear from the actual people who are affected by our education policy and the fact that we don't have the kinds of reforms that I just mentioned in this bill or moving forward, I think would be beneficial to all of us. And so I know we visit schools, and that's very good, and we ought to continue to do that, but I think the committee would certainly benefit from testimony like we heard yesterday from that parent. So in closing, Mr. Chair, I wish I could support the bill. I do not, but I appreciate the effort and appreciate the intent that you have, and I'm a big fan of yours, I'm a big fan of this committee, and appreciate the good hard work you've done here.
So, well, thank you so much, Representative Woodard. Appreciate that. And I want to thank all the committee members again and the staff for all the work and the input from the public and others out there to help in the last 2 years put these bills together. And, the goal of this committee and mine has been to close the achievement gap. But it's been legislators like Chair Mariani and others on both sides of the aisle that have showed me how to close the achievement gap. Because there's lots of different ways to do that. And I think if this bill does anything else, it's to tell every single student out there and every single parent that we value your child. We're not going to give up on your child, and we're going to make sure that they have the resources to make sure that they can reach their full potential, and so we can create the world's best workforce. And so there's lots of different things in this bill that I think are good, that move the dial and continue to say we value every single student in this state, and we want to make sure you move forward. So with that, members, the chair renews House File 3171 as amended be referred to the Taxes Committee. Is that correct? Any other debate? If not, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. No. The motion does carry. So, members, thank you so much. And anything else that we need for the good of the order?
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
just
Representative Woodard.
Do you know what the schedule is going to look like next week? So we've got hearings on Thursday. Are we prepared to talk about that yet? Or?
We do have the hearing for Thursday. Tomorrow, and then nothing yet for the following week.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
So, thank you very much. Thank you, members. Did we adjourn?